Today we are going to talk about how Oklahoma missed on Tulsa McClain running back and Bama running back Josh Jacobs, and all that's coming up after the bumper.
What do you mean you don't subscribe to my son's YouTube channel?
Mama, no!
Just snap the damn ball, RJ.
What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always OU related, college football related, sports related. We have a good time. And today we are going to talk about how Oklahoma missed on Alabama running back Josh Jacobs, even though he's about 100 miles from Norman at the time of his recruitment. But first, I want to tell you about this t-shirt that I got. It's called Bama Don't Want Us. For all the folks who are in on the fun of Oklahoma having a 3-1-1 record against the Tide, and the Tide haven't beaten Oklahoma this century. It's available at the RJ Young Teespring store, which you can find a link to in the description below. So we're going to talk about Josh Jacobs, but first, I want to point you toward the coolest Craigslist ad that I have seen in a very long time. There was a disgruntled Minnesota Vikings fan, and there have to be a lot of disgruntled Purple People Eater fans because, well, this season they were expected to contend for a Super Bowl, especially after last year and what Case Keenum was able to do. And then it felt like they were able to upgrade with Kirk Cousins, although turns out Kirk Cousins is still just Kirk Cousins. Now, there's a reason for which Washington decided, nah, we'll just keep franchising him until it just got too expensive, and then we'll let the dude go. But you can make an argument that in signing Alex Smith to what amounted to a $71 million guaranteed contract, maybe you just pay Kirk Cousins and you get the same amount of production, and maybe Kirk Cousins still has both of his legs. That said, Kirk Cousins just ain't been that dude. It's becoming very clear that Kirk Cousins benefits from having Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs and Kyle Rudolph and a healthy Dalvin Cook as well as Latavius Murray on his offense, but that doesn't really get you past why this team is 6-6-1. Mike Zimmer had it up to here with his offensive coordinator, fired him on Tuesday following what most folks believe was just the worst loss that they could have had on Monday Night Football, because it wasn't as if the Seattle Seahawks are world beaters. They are outplaying what everybody thought they were going to be capable of this year, basically because Russell Wilson is willing them into the playoffs and perhaps could line them up in a first week against Dallas, and we'll get to that in a minute. But, when you lose on Monday Night Football in the way that they lost, where Russell Wilson actually tried to do his best Pat Mahomes impersonation and threw the Vikings a pass, like literally threw them a pass, and you lose that game because you can't move the football, it's kind of hard to take. And this dude had apparently had enough, so he put the stadium up for sale. This is the newly built U.S. Bank Stadium, for which my man said that he would be taking any reasonable offer, starting at $1 million for a stadium that is worth over $1 billion. I'm going to read you the ad in its entirety because it's short and it's awesome. For sale, lightly used $1 million stadium. Occupant has been a team that only has success in breaking the hearts of fans. Long history of collecting talent with no ideas on how to use them. He goes on to say, included $84 million quarterback who can't win against teams with winning records and is 0-7 on Monday Night Football. A league record. Also, you got to keep in perspective, they're paying Kirk Cousins that $84 million over 3 years. So it's a lot of money in a very short amount of time where they expected to win now, and they are not going to win now. As a matter of fact, they're probably not even going to make the playoffs now. So I don't blame a man for being upset. And I just was starting to think, what would it take for Oklahoma fans to put Memorial Stadium up for sale? What would it take for us to be like, you know what? We're selling the Palace on the Prairie. I don't think that there's such a thing. I think we would just keep firing coaches and coordinators until we found one that works. But it's also just kind of fun to see how far we take this as fans, and that we are so upset and we are so angry, especially following a bad loss, that we would rather sell the team than believe that it's worth salvaging. That we would rather sell the stadium than believe that the team playing within it deserves that $1 billion stadium. But that said, good luck to the Vikings, who play the 9-4 Detroit Lions, and then the Chicago Bear defense that has just been destroying and mauling folks. Have fun with Khalil Mack, Kirk Cousins. Team so is not going to make the playoffs. But you know who is going to make the playoffs? The Dallas Cowboys. My Dallas Cowboys. Oh my God. Look, I was as skeptical as everybody else of the Amari Cooper trade, mostly because giving up a first-round pick for anybody in the league, I see that as just kind of an act of terrorism, specifically toward your fan base. Why would I say that? Because even when you were trading for a person like Khalil Mack, or in this case, Amari Cooper, you're mortgaging your future. Because the guy coming out of the 2019 draft or 2020 draft could very well be just as good, but also be better for longer because there aren't the miles and the wear and tear on his body because he's simply younger, right? And you might want to go and use that pick on, say, I don't know, a corner. Or maybe some more linemen to help you because you put everything on Zeke, Dak, and Amari. But we all know the numbers. Amari Cooper has led the league in receiving yards since he has suited up for Dallas, right? We also know that he's leading in yards after the catch. But I thought it was interesting that on top of all of this, and now that Dallas looks like a world beater, that it turns out that Mark Davis is the reason for which Dallas got Amari Cooper. Now, this is interesting because Amari Cooper felt the need to share this news in his post-game celebration after Dallas had beat the Eagles in overtime. He said, look, it wasn't John Gruden and it wasn't the fired general manager. It was actually Mark Davis who wanted me out. And then the owner meetings happen right on time, right? So you get to talk to Mark Davis, and Mark Davis is like, you know what? Amari Cooper just didn't fit our system. What? He said, yeah, okay. We run a West Coast offense, which means we like short routes to guys and hitch routes and, you know, like drag routes. We don't really stretch the field. We don't throw the ball down the field. And he just doesn't fit what we were doing. First of all, Dallas uses that dude in all kinds of ways. He runs hitches, he runs slants, and he definitely runs goes. As a matter of fact, Dak Prescott has gotten so much better at throwing the ball down the field because he trusts Amari Cooper, and the chemistry there is uncanny. But even if that were true, Amari Cooper's first 2 seasons for the Raiders got him into the Pro Bowl. And then he had 2 years where he wasn't very good, but that wouldn't be the reason for which I trade him. And even so, what they were asking for was a first-round pick in 2019 when nobody would do that, so it didn't look like Amari Cooper was going to leave. And then Mark Davis got wind that Dallas was willing to deal and said, make the deal. So John Gruden didn't actually want to trade Amari Cooper. It's Mark Davis, which just goes to show you that owners should own, coaches should coach, and general managers should do the player personnel, but also because he's the owner, he can do what he wants with the team, and that drives people up a wall. That's how you end up with the San Diego Chargers becoming the LA Chargers. That's how you end up with the St. Louis Rams becoming the LA Rams. And that's how you end up with Mark Davis moving the team from Oakland to Vegas and then getting sued by the city of Oakland for moving the team. I'm going to be really interested to see how that works out. But what's very clear is that so many of these owners, Jerry Jones included, want to be known as football men, and they are not. Mark Davis probably would be an okay owner if he just let his general manager and his coach do their jobs. But you know how these owners get, man. They want to plug their noses in here and say what's up and then make a decision because they get to do that. But the reasons for which you wanted to trade Amari Cooper just do not line up with logic. That's your best wide receiver. That's Dallas's best wide receiver. Matter of fact, that's probably the best wide receiver for anybody since he started playing football for the Dallas Cowboys. So yeah, you got a first-round pick back. And right now, that first-round pick seems to be the reason for which the Dallas Cowboys are not only going to make the playoffs, but win the division with a W over Indianapolis. Meanwhile, the Raiders are number 3 in the draft order and getting toward that number 1 spot. Now, maybe that's where you want to be because it's a tankathon for the Raiders at this point. And you know that Derek Carr just ain't going to be your guy going forward. And you also know John Gruden's probably going to have to pick a different offense and actually hand over the reins to an offensive coordinator because his offense is just outdated and that's not what we do now. And defenses can stop it, more to the point. But it is still comical that Mark Davis felt like this was a great football move. And one of the reasons he thought this was a good football move was basically to get out of his old man's shadow. Now, he brought up a guy named Cliff Branch, saying that my dad always wanted to go find the best Cliff Branch, which is a guy who didn't really catch the ball, wasn't really a great route runner, but was fast. Wait a second, if that's the case, then why didn't you sign Justin Gatlin? Because y'all tried to do that at Oakland. You were this close in Oakland to signing one of the best 100-meter sprinters in American history, and you didn't because, you know what? Justin Gatlin runs fast and he can't catch. Wide receivers got to be able to catch. Matter of fact, that's at the top of the list of things that they must be able to do. Catch footballs. But perhaps my favorite piece of evidence for why this was stupid is in that trying to find the next Cliff Branch, if that's what Al Davis was trying to do, he certainly kept looking with guys like Tim Brown, and Cliff Branch wasn't even that good. From 1972 to 1985, he had just 2 1,000-yard receiving seasons. Now, I know that's not necessarily what you were doing back then, but still. And by saying that you're different than your old man, you say, no, I'm going to trade my best wide receiver because, well, I don't want to be considered my old man's son. Come on, just cut your hair for one and get rid of that stupid bowl cut, but also butt out of your general manager and your coach's decisions, unless you're a Dallas fan, in which case you're saying, yes, by all means. Why weren't we in on this Khalil Mack trade? I'm sure we could have made that happen as well. And then you got not just a Dallas team that makes a playoff, but also could contend for a Super Bowl. That said, the Dallas defense is legit, and it's probably trending toward one of the best in the NFL, for whatever that's worth, in this offensive bonanza. And that kind of leads me into the whole thing with Shannon Sharpe and him being stupid on television again. So I was just talking about what the NFL looks like now and how the game is being refereed, but also what you need to win. You need wide receivers that can run slants, that can run hitches, can turn short passes into big gains, and can stretch the field. But more than that, you need quarterbacks that can move, right? We all watched the Kansas City versus LA game on Thursday night, and the one glaring difference between Pat Mahomes and Phillip Rivers isn't necessarily that Pat Mahomes is a magician with a football and he's out here putting together and one mixtapes. It's that Pat Mahomes can move. And in Pat Mahomes being able to move, you're seeing what a difference it is to have that guy at quarterback as opposed to Phillip Rivers, who is basically a tackling dummy, specifically in the first half against the Kansas City Chiefs defensive line, who was just T-fying on him. Not just because the offensive line wasn't that great, but because Phillip Rivers was powerless to get out of the way of oncoming rush. Whereas we saw Pat Mahomes in the same first half basically run 20 yards backwards, turn around, and then make a play for Damian Williams, who, by the way, I'm so happy to see still has his burst into speed as an OU alum. But in the thing between Phillip Rivers and Pat Mahomes, you're seeing two great quarterbacks, right? Two guys that are in the MVP conversations. And yeah, Phillip Rivers got the win, but Pat Mahomes is the future of the NFL. Same thing can be said about watching Pat Mahomes when you put him next to Drew Brees, or when you put Baker Mayfield next to any of these aging quarterbacks that isn't named Tom Brady, Drew Brees, or Phillip Rivers, because the dude can move. He can get himself out of trouble. And in this age where you're getting faster on the defensive line and you're getting smaller so that you can chase down these smaller running backs and these smaller quarterbacks, yeah, you're going to need your quarterback to get out of the way, which makes Shannon Sharpe sound stupid when he talks about Kyler Murray. So Shannon Sharpe is in, like we all are, on whether or not Kyler Murray should play in the NFL or pro baseball next year. But he has said that he believes Alabama is going to make this decision real simple for him because he believes the Alabama defense is so good and they're going to wreck Oklahoma and Kyler Murray so badly that he's going to decide that he doesn't want these problems, that he doesn't want to get hit like this, and he doesn't want to have to contend with defenses that want to eat his lunch. I'm sorry, hello? Have you been watching any of Kyler Murray play this season? Texas said the same thing. He made them look foolish. West Virginia said the same thing. He made them look foolish. The only team that was actually able to do anything with Kyler Murray was Army, and that's because Kyler had half as many snaps as Army did because the best defense against Kyler Murray is keeping the clock moving and holding the ball. So just the nonsense that you would say Kyler Murray would decide, I don't want to be around for any of this because, well, I'm going to get hit, also speaks to you haven't watched the previous 13 games where nobody hit this guy. That is Kyler Murray's great value. Yes, he is accurate. Yes, the completion percentage is awesome. Yes, he can throw the ball very far and very accurately. But what he does best is evade the rush. Most of his rush yardage and his rush plays don't come on designs, but on him scrambling and making things happen when the pocket collapses. Even with an offensive line that was up for a Joe Moore Award, which is for the best offensive line in the country, even with 2 All-Americans on the offensive line, you're still going to be able to collapse this pocket if you bring pressure. And people are going to bring pressure against Kyler Murray because they're going to believe the one thing you don't want him to do is complete passes. You'd rather him take off running. When this guy takes off running, that ain't what you want either, because he can turn a 7-yard loss into a 70-yard touchdown run, just as Texas. Shannon Sharpe, stick to talking about, I don't know, anything that doesn't have to do with Oklahoma football because you sound foolish. Now, as to how Oklahoma could miss on Josh Jacobs. For those of you who don't know, Josh Jacobs is running back at Alabama, and you would have considered him third string to start the season behind Najee Harris and Damian Harris. But in the SEC title game, he had his coming out party. Folks are so focused on Jalen Hurts and what he was able to do to bring Alabama back from the dead and win the SEC championship game that they forgot that Josh Jacobs won MVP of the conference championship game. He rushed for a game-high 83 yards and averaged better than 10 yards per carry against a Georgia defense. And even with that loaded backfield, he's got 53 rushes for 453 yards. And even with that loaded backfield, he's got 94 rushes for 495 yards. That's 5.3 yards per clip. He also had a 59-yarder against Georgia, which was his longest for the year. And in returning kicks, he ain't no slouch. He's averaging 30.6 yards per return, and he took 177 yards to the house in kick return. Add to that 15 catches for 171 yards, and you can see how Josh Jacobs is not only a great running back, he has an opportunity to be one of the better running backs out of Alabama, and all those guys do are go on to play in the NFL and or be up for the Heisman Trophy. This is also a guy who came out of Tulsa McClain, right? So that's just down the road from Oklahoma. And why did Oklahoma not offer this guy? Because nobody had offered Josh Jacobs. As a matter of fact, the Crimson Tide almost missed on Josh Jacobs. They didn't even know about this guy until some tape ran across their eyes and like, maybe we need to go check him out. And then the running backs coach goes to watch him play basketball in McLean and offers him, and then Oklahoma and Mizzou offer him just on the principle that Alabama offered him. But I'm sure that he was looking at the first major offer that he had gotten and said, okay, yeah, I'm going to Bama. Number one, it's Alabama. Number two, they offered me first. And that's going to mean a lot to you. But also, we're not talking about how Oklahoma missed on Prentice Elliott back in the day. He went to Oklahoma State, and there's a lot of folks who would say that that's one of the best high school football players of the last 20 years. Same thing could be said about Felix Jones and how he ended up at Arkansas, or Robert Meacham and how he ended up at Tennessee. We could even take this as far as Dax Hill, who has been committed to Michigan and now Alabama and spurned Oklahoma. A lot of this actually has something to do with the Josh Jacobs story of nobody taking McLean football seriously. And even the folks that take Booker T football seriously don't take it as seriously as they do Tulsa Union or Jinx or Broken Arrow. We're never talking about how Oklahoma missed on Devin Alexander. Why? Because that guy's in jail. But he was one of the better running backs out of his class at Broken Arrow. Nobody's talking about how Oklahoma missed on Mason Fine, and all he's been doing is tearing it up in North Texas. I don't think it's necessarily that the Josh Jacobs story is the norm. I think it's that nobody really trusts the competition that Josh Jacobs was playing against, especially as a wildcat quarterback at McLean. And I also think there's a bias toward football programs that do not have traditional winning seasons, that they do not stack up state championship on state championship. For instance, if Kyler Murray hadn't have gone to Allen, Texas, and he would have gone to a 2A school or a 1A school and put up the same sort of numbers, we would all look at him with suspect eyes and would say, does this kid really deserve his 5-star status? But because he played at Allen, that is without question. We know that he played some of the best competition in Texas, which is to say that he played some of the best competition anywhere at the high school level. You can't necessarily say that about Josh Jacobs. And if you're Alabama and you got the offer to extend and you like what you've seen on film, yeah, extend the offer. And then when Oklahoma comes in late, maybe you have a chance, and they did. So that's how Oklahoma misses on Josh Jacobs, but I don't think it's so simple as to say that they just didn't see the kid's film, because I believe that these coaches watch everybody's film. I think if the kid even shows any flashes, you got to take it seriously. And you can waffle on whether or not to offer a kid because you only got so many. And at this very high level of football, any kid that you offer that doesn't have a lot of big time offers is probably going to take you up, and you're probably going to count that one toward the boat, whereas you were looking to win a huge recruiting battle against another highly touted, highly sought after 4 or 5-star kid. That said, when the kids get to Oklahoma, if they get to Oklahoma, whether it's preferred walk-on status or not, and they can play, we also know that Oklahoma will find a way to get them on the field. See Miles Tees, who also came out of Booker T, started his career at UCO, walked on at Oklahoma, and then turns out to be a scholarship inside slot receiver. So stop with the nonsense about how Oklahoma missed on Josh Jacobs or even missed on Dax Hill, and know that the numbers game is real. And while we all want you to lock up the state of Oklahoma, sometimes that just isn't feasible. When Josh Proctor decided he wanted to leave Owasso to go to Ohio State, there was no swaying him, because he had done the math for himself, which is to say, one, I want to get out of the state of Oklahoma. And two, when you're going to Ohio State, you know they put defensive backs into the NFL. You cannot say that about Oklahoma, not in recent memory. And that's one of the reasons you need to make a change at defensive coordinator. But also because the weight of the world is on your shoulders if you are the #1 recruit in your state and you go to the best university in your state, especially if you didn't grow up wanting to go to school there. It's way different if you want that burden on your shoulders because you want to be there. It's a lot different when you have a lot of folks who are so into the school that you chose and so happy to know that you come out of the state that you have to hold up the state as football good, as football well, as football awesome. Because there aren't a whole lot of people that take Oklahoma high school football seriously. So when we put out a #1 recruit, that kid's usually really, really good. And yeah, it doesn't look good for that kid to leave and go to other universities outside the state. But at the same time, I want the kids to be successful. I want the kids to have a good time. And if you can't have a good time with the weight of the world on your shoulders at Oklahoma, yes, by all means, go to Alabama, go to Ohio State, or wherever else you think you should go. All right, that's it for me. Deuces.